Hey, I'm Dean and this is Legacy Voyage. In Season 1, I'm documenting my journey to earning my first 100K net worth as a full-time college student. Join me as I share some of the lessons I learned along the way. I'm sitting in class, and it's one of those days where I'm just kind of exhausted from the day. Didn't get enough sleep last night. I'm sitting at my desk, kind of zoning off, drifting away. People are talking, and my eyes are slowly closing. My head tilts a little, and it tilts a little more, and then boom, I wake up. I can't be sleeping. I'm in class. It was one of those days today, and I just wrapped it up. We had an interesting discussion about race. Last year, I took a philosophy of race class, and it really dove into what is race. What does that even mean? Should we even be talking about race? Because sometimes race might create even more division, more conflict. Or should we just ignore it altogether? We were dealing with questions like that. And today's topic came up again, so it got me thinking a bit more. I kind of had this half-baked thought that I want to clarify more, which is my thoughts on race. And when thinking about race and racism, there's really two ways. Like there's the macro sense of society. How should society view racism? And I think there's a micro aspect where the question is, how should I look at racism? Now, one of the things I do believe is that racism exists. Racism and discrimination, it's out there. And the reason I believe this is sci-fi science. I found this meta-analysis and it looked at a whole bunch of past studies in recruitment. Now, I don't remember the specifics of it. What I do remember is that it analyzed about 180 applications, I want to say. And with those applications, they found racist behavior, racist tendencies based on things like the name of the person. I've heard studies like this all the time, but this is one that really solidified it. And there's a whole bunch more examples of that. But it got to the point where, okay, I can't ignore that this exists. Racism being mistreatment based on race. I can't ignore that that exists. So the question becomes, how do we deal with it? What now? And I think this is one thing that I'm very counter compared to a lot of other people, especially at Northwestern. My beliefs run very counter to what they think. Because in the macro sense, I think the way society should view it is, of course, racism exists. We should have programs and initiatives and advocating groups that will work on behalf of these races. And they will work towards more equality. But that's on the macro sense. I think in the micro, looking at me as a person, as an individual, I believe I'm better off tending towards the side of ignoring race. Now, what do I mean by that? Something that I'm very against is called the victimhood mindset. A refresher on what I mean by mindsets, it's just the way you perceive experiences. If I go outside and I have sunglasses and you don't, and it's super bright, you're going to have a hard time seeing things. I'm not, because I have sunglasses. And the way we perceive the sun, the way we perceive our experiences, it influences our actions. If I can see clearly, then I can go for a run confident of what I'm going to run into. If you're going to go for a run, it's going to be tough because you can't see. And the same thing applies in real life. If we both have an experience where someone has a quote unquote discriminatory or racist action towards us, and you decide to perceive it in a negative way, I perceive it in a positive way that empowers me and motivates me to go out and work harder and do better, then I think that is a positive cash value on my life. And it comes back to that question, what's the cash value? Now, here's an example of victimhood mindset of why I highly disagree with it. If I go throughout my whole life growing up and everyone around me is telling me that I can't go start a company, I can't go be successful, I can't go do this, this, and that because I'm Tongan, because I'm a person of color. If I go throughout my entire life, those types of stories playing in the back of my mind, and I think it holds me back in what I can do, in my potential. The inverse of that is if I go throughout my whole life and say, my Tongan identity gives me power. It gives me a unique perspective no one else has. And because I'm a person of color, I go through struggles. I go through these things, which makes me strong. And I will use that to my I think that's a better way. It has a positive cash value in perceiving that experience. Because in every position, there are pros and cons. Find the pros in every single position, no matter what you are. If you're born in a super wealthy family, then the pros are you have money, you have connections, you have a net worth that you can rely on. Those are your pros. Go and use it. On the other hand, if you're poor, if you're born to a poor, homeless family, your pros is that you've been to. You know what it's like to struggle. You know what it means to live a hard life and persevere and endure and work through those things. That's your pro. I'll go and use it. It applies to everything, to business, relationships, Well, all of it. In sports too, it's every single position you can think of. In games, every position, they all have their pros and cons. Use your pro. Just wanted to share that real quick. Not too much of an update. Posted our first interview. I think it was yesterday, or maybe the day before. Put out our first clips of the podcast, working on distribution and getting the word out there. But I'll keep you posted. So we're back to game theory and applying that to life. Today, I really want to touch on the idea of influencers because we're all playing this game, and it's this game called life, and we're going throughout life. It's this multiplayer game. Everyone around us, they're a part of our game of life. But something I thought was interesting is that in this game of life, there are those influencers outside of us, other players of the game, and they're influencing us. And it could be positive or negative. But what's really interesting is that we cannot control those influences to a certain extent. I mean, we could control it so far as to say, like, I put myself into lucky opportunities. I make luck for myself. So through that, I create positive influence. But there's always going to be influences in our life that we can't control. But the really cool thing that we can control is how we perceive that influence. For example, let me try to paint a picture with something like a marathon. Imagine you're running in this marathon, and of course there's other racers in the marathon. But not only are there other racers in the marathon, but there's also people on the sidelines who are cheering you on. They're saying, go, you can do this, you can do this. But other influencers are saying, quit already, why are you even starting to do this? And as you're running, you can decide on which influence you want to focus on. If you focus on the influencers, the people who are screaming from the sideline who are saying, go, you can do this, then I think that would probably be better for you to make progress in the game, for you to keep on running, eventually finish the game, as opposed to focusing on the people who are trying to tear you down, trying to negatively influence you in your progress. But here's a super powerful part, is that we can turn negative influence into positive progress. The way we can do that is by changing the way we perceive negative influence. If instead I looked at someone who's cheering from the sideline as I'm running this marathon, they're yelling at me, Dean, stop trying. Why are you even running? You're too fat, or you can't do this. If I look at that as motivation, because I want to go and I want to prove them wrong, or not even that, but I use it as fuel to keep me going and shifting that negative influence into positive progress, I think that's where the magic comes. And it fits into a lot of the stuff that I've been preaching on this podcast is about this pragmatic way of life. Instead of that victimhood mindset in perceiving your experiences, even if they're negative, even if they're even traumatic, which I'll talk about later, even if they're terrible, perceiving it in a positive light where I look at that experience and I say, I'm stronger because I went through that experience. Now, going along more with the analogy is you can control which influence you want to focus on. But on top of that, you can also control how much you're influenced by that thing. Because talking about influencers, I think there's different levels of it. Like, for example, if I'm running in the marathon, there's a stranger on one side who's yelling at me, you can't do that. Why are you even trying? Just give up already. If it's a stranger, I probably wouldn't heed much power to them, or I probably wouldn't listen to their influence. But I would probably listen more to someone who's more important to me, like a family or close friends, and I should heed more to their influence. Because I think it's very dangerous if you were to completely cut out what you perceive as negative influence. Because realistically, let's take it to the extreme. If I want to go in the marathon, but I know for sure that let's say my leg is broken or something, but it's not all the way broken. It's like almost broken, that if I run in this marathon, that I'm probably going to break it even more. And all of my family, my doctor's telling me, Dean, don't run this marathon because you're going to hurt yourself. And I say, you know what? No, I'm going to go and do it anyways because I want to go make positive progress. And I just completely cut them out. Then I think that's super dangerous. Because if we don't expose ourselves to what we think is negative influence, then it creates what's called this open feedback loop. And I learned this from Elon's biography, is that if we do something and we don't get feedback on that thing that we do, and it's just an open feedback loop where we just go and we do things without thinking about it or without thinking about the consequences or the implications that those actions have, then it's very, very dangerous. Because that's when we get into super dicey territory. We start doing things that we'll regret in the future. Now, obviously, this analogy, it's not black and white. There's, of course, some gray area in it. That's why I bring up the fact that you probably don't want to completely cut out that quote unquote negative influence because it creates this open feedback loop that will probably come back to haunt. That's something I really want to share. Something else is that the other day I went to a friend's comedy show. It was just like a stand-up college comedy thing. We actually went to his last year. It was his first stand-up show. Obviously, he's super nervous. Like, we come into this room, there's like 20 of his friends in there. I can't even imagine stepping up on stage, looking out into the crowd, and there's 20 people who have influence in your life, and you're gonna go and do stand-up for the first time in your entire life. But that's what he does. He goes up there, he does his stand-up routine, he runs through it, and he absolutely kills it. This is last year. He kills it, man. That man he cracked some funny jokes, I cannot lie, but he did really, really well. So coming into this year, we're all looking forward to it again. A whole bunch of the house pulls up, like probably 10 of us. We all come to a show again this year. He tells his bit, he does his stand-up part, and it's not as good. Like, straight up, it's just not as good as it was last year. I mean, it was good, but compared to what he had last year, it wasn't. And after the show, he was coming back to us, and he was trying to get feedback. He's like, how'd I do, guys? How'd I do? And he kept saying this thing. He said, well, I noticed there weren't as many laughs as I had last year. He kept bringing that idea up over and over again. I was thinking to myself of how dangerous that is, to stake your level of growth on how many laughs you got, to stake your level of success on how many laughs you got. And the reason I think it's dangerous is because, let's say he goes again tomorrow. He goes and he absolutely bombs it. Like, not a single person laughs. He's just up there trying to crack jokes, dead faces in the whole crowd. Then what that probably does, it probably tells him to quit if he measures it by how many laughs he gets. But I think what's more powerful is if you measure your growth by the number of reps you get. Because I'm a strong believer in this, is that reps are the only reliable measure of growth, especially when you're starting off. Maybe this belief will change in the future, but for example, with Nesian News, my first interview podcast was terrible. I mean, straight up, it was bad. Even this podcast, me recording my journey, if you go back to my very first episode, it was just bad. But I didn't stake it on, I wasn't focused on how many views I got or how many engagements I got online. I'm more focused on getting those reps in, on recording these podcasts, and getting better as I play this game. Even with Nesian News, I'm not focused on the number of views I get. But what I've realized is that I just gotta get reps under my belt. I just gotta record as many interviews as I can in the shortest possible amount of time to get the most growth that I can possibly. Because, like I said, reps, as I see it, are the only reliable measure of growth. I think that's really powerful. So the final thing I want to touch on real quick is that I'd rather regret failing than trying. I think this is really important when thinking of this fail forward mindset. When you're too scared to even take the step forward that you don't try to begin with. I think applying this to business or relationships or school or really anything is that if you look at that thing and you can say that you'd rather regret failing than trying, then I think you should do it. Like, the way I think about it is I have my 85-year-old self. I do this exercise a bunch where I try to put myself in the frame of mind as my 85-year-old self. I'm 85 years old trying to give myself advice where I am right now. Would my 85-year-old self regret failing more than trying? I don't think so. I think I'd rather regret failing than trying. And I think that's really powerful. Getting over the hurdle of starting the game. Because I think that might be the hardest part of the game is starting it. But then there's also just playing it, which is super difficult. But I don't think it's as hard as starting the game. Real quick, I just wanted to recheck myself. I didn't mean I would rather regret failing than trying. I should have said I'd rather regret failing than not trying is what I meant to say. So everything I said, like in the past couple of minutes, just rephrase that into I'd rather regret failing than not trying. With the life update, I mean, things are going, man. It's a lot on the plate. Like recruiting for next quarter and for summer while trying to do Nesian News, while doing all the other internships and responsibilities, while keeping my health in order, which is the most important thing. It's a lot on the plate for sure, but I'm loving it. I mean, I really do love playing this game because I'm learning so much and I'm just becoming a better person. Becoming the best version of Dean that I could be by playing this game and progressing forward. And that's something that I'm really enjoying. I had a couple interviews. One was with Helios. Helios went well. their project. It's like a healthcare senior living. I think I talked about it before. So we'll wait to hear back from them. The other thing is UBS just had an interview with them today. I think it went really well. Like, I killed that interview. I cannot believe if they choose someone over me because that interview was amazing. The other thing was with TDP, which is like a private equity firm. I had that interview last week sometime. Bunch of interviews, and then getting everything in order with Nisha News is the biggest thing. Like, the importance of SOPs, systems, or I think it's standard operating procedures, but it's a way of me to give a set list of instructions to outsource different parts of the process with like creating interviews and editing and everything like that. So after I do that, that'll be amazing to get that off my plate so I can start focusing on other things. But yeah, that's pretty much everything for the life update. I think the biggest thing is just keep on playing the game, getting more reps in as we go about life. So I'll keep you in touch and in the loop of how the game is going for me. I record these episodes completely free to share success with everyone. So the only thing I ask is that if you learned anything or found something interesting in this episode, just leave a review and share it with a friend. Only takes 5 seconds and it would mean the world. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next episode. Tatok, see you.